Johari with us, and so we'll just give a brief introduction about him. Sanjay sir, right now, is the Vice President and National Head for Indus Towers Limited. Earlier, he was serving as an EVP and Chief Operating Officer for Global Infrastructure in Sterlite Power. Before that, he has also served as a Vice President and Circle Business Head for Bharti Infratel Limited. Before that, he was the Vice President inside Greenlight Planet Inc. And he has also served as Director Operations in Philips Healthcare. And he started his career from Voltas, and he also, went to Bombardier and actually served the organization for around 8 years. Besides, he has been a great mentor and a great leader, for all of us to look forward to. And he is a kind of a role model for many of us as well. So I will give the stage to you, and you take it up from here. Yeah. So over
Good.
to you,
Thank
Sanjay sir.
you. Thank you, Rishikesh. Obviously, thank you for what you are doing for the rest of the community here, for all youngsters who want to make big, and who you have been in touch with, and the one the way you talked about your passion, and commitment to what you are doing. I really appreciate that, and thanks for giving this platform to interact with a lot of today's youth. Not that I consider myself old. I am also 40 years young. So that's something, and I really appreciate being here and talking to all of you. So Rishikesh, asked me that when I connect with most of you youngsters, who sort of starting their careers. So some of you have started their careers and then gone into MBA. Some of you who have done your engineering and just about started, and some are still pondering what next, etc. So what we thought is that it will be good for me to sort of talk through what normally sticks around. I wouldn't say going through one's particular career journey is that important, but I think what's important is that I believe that it'll be good for me to sort of tell you guys maybe some short list stories over the 25 years of time that I've spent working in industry. And my good fortune, my good luck, maybe the way I shaped my career as well. While Rishikesh talked about the different kinds of companies that he mentioned, not sure how many of you caught it, but not that it's really relevant there. But I think the important part here is, and something that I personally have been doing with my career over the last 25 odd years, is that I've always tried to sort of get into and across industries. One thing I'm really proud about is that I've been able to serve in 7 or 8 different kinds of sectors or industries, like air conditioning and refrigeration, railways and high tech engineering, infrastructure and telecommunication, healthcare, solar companies, and B2C and B2B companies. And I think the most important part about doing that is this entire thing of learning something new. And that's where I would like to begin. One of the things that I have learned personally over a period of time is that I've seen quite a few people who sort of put a stop on their on their yearning for learning, which is what I call it, is they stop learning. And I personally believe that that's something one should never do. Some of us sort of say that, okay, I've done my engineering, I've done enough, I'm going to now work around and get experience, and of course keep growing. And then of course I'm going to teach about what I've done. I'm going to put the principles and concepts into application, and so on and so forth. But then there is the other category who would say that, okay, I've done my engineering, let me do my MBA. After doing my MBA, let me do something else, and so on and so forth. So I personally believe that learning never stops. My father always mentioned that a man is a student all his life. And obviously that is something I've always tried to follow. So having done the engineering, I tried to do an executive MBA. Then I tried to do certification courses, and so on and so forth, for a simple reason that I believe that certificates might not be adding value sometimes. I mean, they obviously are very strong, but the day we stop learning is the day we don't really we in a way we stop growing as well. And so I think that's something that I've always been making an attempt at. So I think my first piece of, I wouldn't say an advice honestly, but my first piece of, first bit to put on the board would be, guys, don't stop this learning, in a sense that don't let the curiosity go out of the window. Be curious. Think about, what next. um, think about what all can we learn from. And I would like to give a very quick, very small example on this as well. One of my life's major gurus have been my late father, who was an engineer in the early years of independent India and be honors from those days. So used to be pretty heavyweight, right? Was a general manager in his own domain, etc. But once I saw him asking silly questions to a mason who was actually doing some work, and I was like, why is this guy who knows everything asking silly questions, to a person who is just a mason? Um, and I sort of almost felt belittled by what he did. I was young and brat at that time, and for me, I was, just about doing my engineering, and um, I knew a lot, right? And I knew everything. So I was in that domain of I know everything. But then I found it very embarrassing that he's asking these kind of questions. Later on, I somehow got the courage of, going and asking him, why exactly were you doing that? And the kind of answer that I got was, what, I might know a lot about these things, but then when I ask questions, obviously, I obviously don't know everything. So, I don't want my learning to die with me. I want to know more and more. And by doing that, by humbly and very humbly asking these questions to a so-called Mason, I gave, that much amount of pride and passion and respect to that Mason. And believe me, the Mason is going to do a fantastic job of it. And indeed, eventually the Mason did do that. So that was his way of, obviously giving respect to each other, um, showing humility, and obviously, striving for that continuous learning, which is where, I would like to talk about the second point. Um, One of the things that I think make great leaders, and I would like to maybe talk about maybe two or three points, and there are quite a few books which are also available on this subject. Is, you know do leaders need to be vulnerable, or can they show a vulnerable face? um, can leaders be humble and, show humility? I believe yes, absolutely. And that's something that I have always felt, that great leaders have the hallmark. The best hallmark of great leaders is that they are extremely humble, they are polite, and they respect and they show respect to the others, so that they give the space to others. So I think, um, and this is a classical theme, which people have been obviously debating for a while now. Can leaders be humble? I personally have seen a lot of leaders who have been extremely humble. They give the space to others, and they push. Obviously, they would push you for results. They would push you, to take ownership of the work you do, to deliver your results. They would sort of groom you, but they would not abuse you. And I think that's something that I have personally been practicing for a while now, and I believe that it sort of connects you with the others, with your team members, with your stakeholders and colleagues and partners and customers at a genuine level. Because if you have a genuine level of connect with others, I believe you can do fantastic and you produce results. Not only results, but you can make, sort of connections for life, relations for life. And believe me, when the chips are down, the relations matter a lot. Which is where I would like to come to, the other point that I was trying to sort of come to is, um, how important is it for any individual who is in business, or who is an entrepreneur, or who is working for other organizations, to be good at communication and articulation? I think this is one area which I personally believe has been, in a way, missing from all our curriculums from college or school, etc. We've been taught subjects. We've been taught maths. We've been taught science and EVS as, as kids, maybe arts, and here and there. But I don't quite remember, at least not in our days, where people would, where would actually teach you how to communicate and articulate, and, go to others genuinely and talk and resolve conflicts. So I think that's the other area, which I believe is going to be a very important area. And as youngsters, um, a few things that you would probably um, like to keep in mind is how to be humble with others, how to not give up on your learning and curiosity, how to take ownership, and ensuring that you really drive the results, how to really inspire others to be with you, how to influence and get them to see your point of view, and also be empathetic enough to understand their point of view, so that eventually it's the big picture that you're looking at. So I think these are few things which I believe are absolutely essential as you start your career. Look, when we join a new organization, we are young. We know we've got the talent. Obviously, when we get selected, um, and we start working upon. So what we worry about is, technically, how strong am I? Am I able to produce the results? And sometimes we sort of forget that how important it is to also ensure that we make excellent relations at while we work as well. So I think in this particular stage that you're in, it's important for you to not create boundaries or silos in which you work. For example, some of you might be selected in an X function and someone is in Y function. Don't keep yourself related to only the objectives of that X or Y function. Look at the big picture, take ownership of end to end, and ensure that any project that you pick on, any work that you pick on, think about the big picture, think about how the organization really wins, how all of you are able to win, right? So it's not that you need to compete and always come first, because unfortunately that's what we've been taught since our kid days, that you got to be number one, you got to be number two or three. um, but believe me, in organizations it's not about only about being number one. It's about how the organization wins at the end of the day, how you in your function are obviously doing your best, but while at the same time ensuring that you take everyone along with you and look at the big picture and make things possible, so that eventually you succeed and your organization succeeds. So start of the career, be hungry for learning. um, Spend as much time learning new tricks of the trade, new functions, new getting new domain knowledge, etc. Don't give up on your learning, and you know show that respect and humility which obviously the other person deserves. So it's obviously, in other words, called giving respect. So show that respect, give that space for each other, and make that space for you, so that you are able to make that impact eventually. So that's what I thought I will talk about today. I don't think I want to bore you people to death by doing a monologue here. Not at all. I honestly was looking forward to more of an interaction. Rishikesh asked me to share a few things from what I have done and what I have practiced and what I have learned. I thought it'd be good for me to sort of talk about these things. But honestly, I look forward to the interaction session with all of you. So, Rishikesh, thanks once again, and over to you.
Yes, sir. So, so I've already got a lot of questions from the audience. So one of the questions that I've got is that what can we do to stay curious and maintain zest of life, of learning more and more in today's fast-paced life?
Great. I think that's a great question, Anuba. And honestly, one of the things that should come from within, right? Um, Now, the way we are working today, I believe, so much of social media and, everyone's everywhere nowadays. I mean, you look up a person, you can look through a person right on the social media platforms. So you've got a lot of platforms. But what that's also made is that's in a way sort of made people also a bit more disconnected. Now, having said that, your question is maintaining a zest for life and also being curious and learning at the same time. You see, that's something that should come in more internally. At the end of the day, one should think that, have I learned something new today? Have I experienced something new today? So one needs to get out of that mold that I know a lot. It's about how can I start enjoying things that I don't know but others know. So for example, if I were to meet Anuba someday and Anuba tells me, I'm good at so and so, and which I personally, or maybe Rishikesh is not aware of it, and the one thing that I would personally do is ask about how exactly, what exactly to do to, learn those things. And taking cue and taking happiness from learning that someone else knows something which I am not aware of. I think that something is a very basic thing. And if you start doing that, you start appreciating small little things in life. I mean, to be honest, there are some people who are extremely good at singing. Believe me, even if I try singing, I wouldn't understand the sur and tal. And that's not a subject that I'm competent at all, right? But if there's someone, let's say Rishikesh is very good at singing and he knows his sur and tal. If I ask Rishikesh, what does sur mil and mean and tal mean, and the way he tries to explain it, and if I show a bit of compassion in it, and if I show a bit of responsiveness, saying, okay, wow, that's good, I have learned something, and let me go and try and practice, maybe in my bathroom or somewhere. I think I would have done a great, a bit of service here by obviously trying to learn something, appreciate something that I don't know, and then maybe follow it. You never know. I'll give an example. Um, Last 4 years, I sort of developed a love for cooking. And today, my family calls me a chef. Of course, I don't cook that good, but believe me, weekends my kids look forward to the kind of food that I serve them, and I make an attempt, to hijack the kitchen from my mother and my wife every weekend. And it could be, Indian, it could be Chinese, or it could also be, European food. So that's something that I've picked up in the last 4 or 5 years only. I wasn't born as a cook. But the point is, I started enjoying that. And why I started enjoying that, believe me, I absolutely enjoy when I cook nowadays. So weekends sometimes, I mean, at least twice a month, I ensure that both the ladies go out of the kitchen and the kitchen is entirely mine. Of course, they still help me with all the other work, but I relish it nowadays. And I think that's the point. You start enjoying small little things, you go a long way. So that's my response. I'm not sure whether I've asked the question, but I made an attempt at least.
Yes. Sir, we've got another question like, do college tag really matter in the long run or maybe in the short run, being from a very good college?
This is $1 million question. Believe me, it's $1 million question, but I'll give you an example. And for a moment, let's put the colleges aside. Um, I'll give a very quick, simple question. How many of us, from our school days? I mean, if I look at, now that I have been out of school for almost 30 years, I don't know how many of the top 10 students really became successful or not. And honestly, life basically means success. Obviously, success means a lot to different people. I mean, success for me personally would be something else. Success for Rishikesh would be different. Success for one of you would be different. But at the end of the day, one of course decides what success to me. um, I think similar to that, look, good colleges obviously get you to the doorstep. There's no two ways about that. And I would be lying if I tell you that good colleges don't do that. Yes, obviously the top colleges will always get you to the doorstep. What I mean is they'll get you to the interview. They will probably also get you past the interview. But believe me, once you have landed onto the ship called the organization that you're serving, or the business that you're in, uh, you're on your own. You know, then it's a jungle. And there in the jungle, the people who really matter are obviously the people who are able to make an impact. Now, uh, what's essential is that even if you come from a good, not so good, relatively not so good, and so on and so forth college, if you have got your if you've got your, as I mentioned, learning there, if you have this will to succeed, if you have will to learn, and if you're also willing to sort of also unlearn some of the things that are not so relevant in life, and if you're able to really drive results, look at the big picture, and deliver results. And that's where exactly what organization wants. Organizations, simply speaking, want people, or businesses simply, put in charge those people who are able to understand eventually five things. A, what the business is all about. So obviously, whether you have good commercial acumen or business understanding at all or not. Number two, what do your customers want? right? And if you are extremely good, I mean, you might be extremely talented, you might be from one of the best colleges in the world, but if you really don't understand what your customer wants, honestly, believe me, you're not going to be a success at all. Number three, if you don't understand, your business drivers, what drives your business, what gets you market share, what gets you profitability, what gets you, customer buy-in, etc., etc., what drives your technology, sorry, again, you're not going to be successful. Number four, very important, working with people. And again, that's something, as I mentioned, is not taught in colleges and schools. It's unfortunately one of the most non-significant part of our life. Working with people, giving them the respect, giving them their space, ensuring that you inspire them to deliver the results, etc., etc., that's the fourth part. So working with people, absolutely essential. And fifth and foremost, are you able to really inspire and motivate not only the people but also the relevant stakeholders, which are the most essential part. So in your business domain, the stakeholders could be the government, the stakeholders could be your investors, the stakeholders could be your customers, your own people, your own teams, your competitors, etc., etc. So unless you're good at this, and that's what is going to define whether you come, and obviously the good part is most of the good colleges, as I mentioned, do prep you for them. The best of MBA colleges obviously prep you much better from that. I mean, from all what of us know, what so many of us know, that most of the good MBA colleges, the B schools, will obviously prepare you for all the difficult situations in life, how to deal with them. So eventually, um, my take on this: good colleges matter to an extent, that they get you to the door, but once you're inside the door, it's your character that matters, it's your integrity that matters, and it's your drive for results and compassion for workers and your passion for work is what keeps you there and takes you up. You might be from the best of colleges, but if you don't have these ingredients, um, you're going to be left out in that college as well. So I think, um, good colleges, not so good colleges, if you are amongst the top 10, 15, 20% or percentile, and if you have the drive, or these ingredients, I think you will go places. So that's my belief on this.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. So we have got another question from one of the candidates over here. He's asked like, uh, yes. So a lot of people talk about leadership. A lot of people talk about the traits of leadership, but nobody talks about how to develop a leadership. A lot of people, keep on comparing between a boss and a leader. So they just do that, a kind of comparison sheet that they actually put it in front of you, but they don't tell how to, transition from being a boss to being a leader.
So this is an excellent question, and believe me, I don't think I'm in the capacity to answer that. I'm not a great leader myself. Um, but I'll tell you what. One of the programs that I had done long back, with an HR guru. The HR guru asked us, and it was Mr. Guru Narayan, by the way. He asked us. Those were, by the way, the days of the overhead projectors, the OHP, where you had a plastic sheet and you actually wrote by a pen on that, OHP marker on that, and then you presented. So he asked us, why don't you draw, or you rather, write down leadership traits of three different leaders. And he said, select them from history, mythology, wherever you want to select them, but present it. And while people, presented quite a few, and quite a few colleagues, and I had the fortune of working with some excellent people in my life, believe me. um, and some people wrote, I mean, I saw so when we saw the presentation, there were like 25, 30 points written down by people across different kinds, etc., etc. Someone presented Mr. X, someone presented Mr. Y. My slide was a sketch, and my slide was a sketch. The first sketch was of a flute with a peacock, क्या बोलते हैं उसको, मोरपंख, right? The other sketch was that of a turban, a triangular turban with a small frill from the back. And then the other one was, a balding head with a round spectacles. Um, And believe me, everyone connected, because these were three of the different and complete different characters that I had presented. First one obviously was Lord Shri Krishna, who obviously had great leadership characteristics. The other one was Shivaji, again, a hero or a leader who is almost worshipped. And third one was Mahatma Gandhi, again someone who's been worshipped, and I mean, he's a hero, right? The Mahatma, the father of our nation. Now, what do these people have in common? All three of them were great leaders in their respect, right? And what do we learn from them? Lot. I mean, honestly, one could write books on this. Sri Krishna, clearly the leader who was at the back of everything that had happened in the Mahabharata. I mean, Sri Krishna Krishna was the one who was responsible for Mahabharata, in a way, if I could put it. I mean, people would obviously argue against that, but he was the one who actually sort of played the entire game, right? He always upheld principles and ensured that the principles are never, never, ever, killed. So he was the one who sort of was always behind, but inspiring people to deliver. Then there was Shivaji leading from the front, the person who gave the world guerrilla warfare. I mean, a great leader by his own method. Took on the great Mughals at those times. Fought for freedom, the first real freedom fighter of the country, probably, um, or well, arguably one of the firsts. And again, had the guts and gumption to say that I don't want to fight and get killed, but I would like to stay on the cause to eventually win. And his eventual cause was, I want freedom for my people, right? From the invaders. And therefore, if it meant that if you have to give up a silly conflict somewhere, you give it up. Doesn't really matter. Look at the big picture. So Shivaji was, one of those was strong leaders who actually teaches us to look at the big picture. His big picture was the freedom for the nation, right? So he took up, let's say, a 300 people small army and fought against a 5,000 army. But when it came to difficult points, he would not actually say that, he never ran away from the battlefield, but he would pick his battles very carefully. And guerrilla warfare is one of those things, right? I mean, the movie Tanaji that came in demonstrate his leadership, that he could actually inspire Tanaji to do, what someone in today's world probably would never ever do for a leader, right? Give up on something which is so close to his heart, which is basically his son's wedding, which was, by the way, going to happen very soon, and took in around a couple of hundred people and got that the fort of Kondana. Now that's the kind of leadership that obviously Shivaji gave. Third, obviously, we don't need to talk about it, right? Mahatma Gandhi, without really doing anything, obviously, one of the key pillars. And I don't say the only single person responsible for India's freedom. No, there were sort of them. There were lots of them. But Gandhiji was one of them. Now, I can give a story here. Question you asked is, how does one get inspired? Um, and how does one transform from a good boss or a manager to a leader? I think, again, as I mentioned, certain inbuilt principles, and these are inbuilt principles, these, if one imbibes, really goes a long way. Look, number one, basic principle of respect, right? You respect a person for what he is, you accept the person for what he is, and obviously if he is not really good at producing results, you try to impart those skills to him and make the difference to him. But you don't straight away say that, I want this thing done, I don't care how you do it. So I think that's the first question that comes to mind. Am I, as a leader, empathetic enough, respectful enough? Am I willing to understand what problem the other person might be that he's not delivering those results? Am I hiring good? Am I then, thinking about others? And that's where quite a few of us sometimes don't give that much importance to. So the fact that if I'm empathetic, if I understand, so let's say I gave Rishikesh a particular project and he didn't succeed. It's not that he's a villain and he doesn't want to succeed. I personally believe that no villain is ever born at all. Time either makes a villain, or the circumstances make a villain, or circumstances make a failure. So the point is, if we recognize that there is a failure, and that failure is of the organization or of the function or the team, it can never be an individual's failure. I think the time we start learning that, the time we start acknowledging that, there is a possibility of failure. And what, as a leader, am I going to do it? Am I inspiring the person to really give his all? And I think if we start asking those questions, am I empathetic enough? Am I inspiring enough? Do I understand the other person's problem? And am I able to make the other person look at the big picture to deliver on results? I think if we do that, I think those are characteristics of a leader. And the question on how do you transform, I think you start practicing these things. And believe me, these are very, very simple things. I mean, one of the things is, again, you have a member in your team who doesn't deliver results, who you feel is, oh god, this is a pity. I mean, this is a pity on humanity. This guy doesn't, he has no worth sitting in this my organization. The time you start this deciding that for others, you're not doing it. The point is, even if that guy who you feel is not good enough comes to your cabin or comes to your table, you say, all right, come in. What can I do for you? What is the problem? How can I help you? You know, this quintessential age old thing. Hey, good morning. How can I help you? Or how can I be of help? I think we've lost it. Old days, people used to actually ask this question. No one asked this question ever. But I believe that question actually came from this entire empathetic behavior, that how can I help you means how can I actually become a part of your problem, and how can we do it together? The time we ask this question, I think we start our transformation journey. Or uske baad, obviously, there are a lot of things that one could do to practice it. But I think the first step is to do this. I don't know if that again answers the question, but I think it's an effort I was trying to make.
Yes, it really answered him, sir, actually. And we have got another follow-up question from Aditi. She asks, how do you drive change in an organization as a leader, especially when the employees are rigid towards any change?
So the classical definition of this
And this is usually
is
the case in case of.
no. So there is obviously the classical answer to it, which is the theoretical answer, which is communication. So to bring in change, you obviously go to the change management guru. I'm not going to quote. Um, Bring in a sense of urgency, talk about your plans, give a vision, make a long-term vision, look win-win, etc. So that's the classical method. But honestly, there are three things, very simply speaking, and I am not guru on that, believe me, but there are three things that I personally feel one needs to do. Number one, again, first is, what's in it for me? So when you talked about employees being rigid, one needs to understand, as a leader, if one is trying to bring in change, the first question, what's in it for those employees? Number one. Number two, the big picture. And that is invariably the most essential part, right? I mean, change management is about, obviously, you bring in a vision, you should have a vision, you should talk about that vision, you should communicate at least 8 times, bring in a sense of urgency, etc. But most essential, um, how is that employee related to that change, and how does that change effectively, what does that change mean to him or her, right? If for example, let's talk about a very simple example here. There is a process that one has been following in an organization for a long time, and people get used to processes very quickly, right? So what happens typically is people sort of become habituated to those processes, and eventually they become the prisoners of habits. So and this is a very classical way, by the way. This is a very classical way, and I'm going to give you an example. In fact, I was actually discussing this example with my daughter just a couple of days back. In fact, day before, on the dining table. Our dining tables, by the way, have these storytelling sessions that we somehow try to build in, so that we sort of learn from each other. So my daughter or my wife would probably tell us some stories from the college or school that they go in, and the work that they do, and I would try and do. So here's an example from one of my old organizations. I'm not going to name because I don't think that's the right thing to do here, but here's an example, and this is an example for people who understand supply chains and how they work, right? And it's a very typical one. So we used to get material, steel sheets, from a factory which was around 1,200 kilometers from ours. That would normally, in those times, take 7 to 8 days for the material to actually reach our factory. Once the material came into our factory, it would get unloaded. And I'm talking about steel sheets. So, right, it's basically about tons of material, and you need a either a forklift or a crane to download this kind of material. So typically a whole day goes into downloading, typically 14 to 16 tons of steel sheets that you get in a long carrier truck. So you unload the material, then that material is typically weighed, counted, quality check, etc., etc. Then it goes into a stores, and once it is done, then the next step of the supply chain is basically um, to take the material out and send it again to a different subcontractor who would then make sheet metal parts out of that for working on the next stage. Now, this typical cycle time here was easily between 4 to 5 days. All of this happened 4 to 5 days. Now, what has happened, and by the way, when we use these, when you download the material, you put them into stores, and then you ship it to the other contractor or a vendor or partner using a different truck, which would in those days cost us around 3,200 rupees per truck. And I'm talking around 25 years back. Well, 20 years back. Um, you can do the maths how costly it is today. Um, Now, what we did here as a team, we thought that, look what, this is just wasting 5-7 days. And 5-7 days of waste, by the way, is a huge wastage for any organization. And it's costing us 3,200 rupees. So what we did, we came up with an idea. The trucker who used to come from so long, we talked to the driver saying, hey, you know what? Would you like to earn some 400 rupees extra? And he would like say, what? I say, yes. You don't need to unload all the material. My quality engineers and my stores guys will actually climb onto the truck. They will do their checks over there itself. They'll open some random checks because it was a random testing anyway. I mean, the material came in with certain checks, etc. And by the way, today all these things are gone. By the way, and I'm just trying to say how change happens, right? So, and he would invariably, the drivers would invariably say, "Ha, this makes sense. If I can earn 400 rupees extra, why not?" Because the distance he had to travel was hardly anything, just about 11 kilometers, for which a normal tempo would take around 3,200. So all that 16 tons, I would share, be sharing or sending that material in 4 tempos. That was gonna cost me 13 to 14,000 rupees. But the same driver who had come 1,200 kilometers, if I asked him to go 11 kilometers more, no one actually even recognizes. But I paid him for that extra diesel that goes to him and for his own food, etc., etc. So 400 to 600 rupees is the payout that I made to him against a voucher, fully legal, fully legitimized, perfectly accounted for all financial books, etc. And what my team did with me is that try me to the truck, do the quality checks, do the entry, etc., 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 and reduce that lead time of 5 to 7 days to 4 hours, and save, instead of 12 or 13,000 rupees, make it in less than 1,000 rupees. Here is a change. Here is a classical change. Now the classical change was what's in it for us, right? Why did my quality assurance guy actually climb a truck when he was not even supposed to do that? That was the influencing skill at work. That was ability to actually show him that, look, by saving 5 days, we are actually going to have 5 days of extra production output. 5 days of extra production output means X thousand rupees to my organization, and eventually they're going to serve a customer. So that is the kind of explanation. Number one, obviously, telling them why should they do that. They were not breaking any rules, by the way. They were just going out of the way to do something. The principle was perfect. What was being done is that a lot of expeditious work was being done between 3 different departments or 4 different departments, right? And eventually the company was saving money. So the finance and accounts guys were extremely happy. The factory guys were happy. Everyone else was happy because a 7 day work at 14,000 was done. Now the question that my daughter is isn't so simple. Why were you doing that all these years? But then that's the whole point. Change takes time. But the main thing is you show the person what's in it for them. um, make them look at the big picture, and sometimes changes are very easy to do. You only have to do it a bit of a convincing. So I think that's some of the points or some of the recipes to do it. Obviously, you could look up change management. There are theories and books on it, and books worth 400 pages. I'm sure, simply speaking, your ability to influence, your ability to see, ensure what's in it for me, and your ability to make people look at the big picture is one of the major drivers. And sometimes when the major drivers fail, then obviously you look at the other means, which could be your formal authority and stuff like that. But I believe, well, that's something that one should not jump into directly. As a boss, I could always, tell my person, do it, I don't care what happens. But I don't think that's the right thing to approach, to start with. I think if you show these two three things, people start getting it, and then you got to help them. You can't just leave them on their own. Ye change aap kar dalo. It doesn't happen like that. You've got to be part of that as well. Again, I've made an attempt, Rishikesh, and I think Aditi, but I'm not sure whether I answered. I hope it serves the purpose.
Yes, it has actually served the purpose, and it has served the purpose for me as well, sir. Because these are some things like which I never had a talk to you. When I was working with you in Sterlite, but these are some of the stories which even I will use it. With
Sure, sure.
sir,
Thank
I've
you.
got another question. From one yeah, one of the guys is that you talked about a skill of proper articulation. If you could explain that further, like a little bit. So how could we actually work on that, basically?
Sure. So my first little request to everyone, simply go ahead and buy this book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's my first request to everyone. Consider it a request or an advice, from an elderly. Um, but it's an excellent book. It's one of the life changing books. Dale Carnegie, so one of the better authors of our times. Um, Great book, and that'll probably detail a lot of questions that you're asking right now. Coming to articulation and communication, as I said, this is something that I personally believe is absolutely essential, as it's sort of, this is the secret recipe that really makes uh, people successful, I believe personally. Now, you might be extremely good at what you do, but if you're not able to articulate your problem properly, you're not able to really put the problem on the board with the will to solve it, with the other person, it's not really going to help. And I'll give you an example. There's a typical saying that you would hear from a lot of people. I have done my bit, the ball is in your court now. And this happens typically when interfunctional work is happening, and or interpersonal work is happening, where four or five people are working and teaming up together to deliver results. And a lot of people would say, look, I've done my bit, it's up to you now. um, the ball is in your court is something that I have personally never ever used in my life, because I believe that there are no different courts. So that's the first bit that I have always done, because if there is something that I am working on, it is something that I'm working for the organization. If I'm heading my own organization, I would love that all of us work for the sake of the organization, not for the sake of a leader or a manager, right? I mean, there are instances where people work for leaders and managers and bosses, but I think what's eventually important is what are we doing together for the organization. Now, that organization, you might be the owner of it, you might be the proprietor, you might be the founder, or the promoter, or you might simply be at the helm of it as a CEO or CEO or whatever. The question is, what are we doing as an organization for the organization? Now, articulation. The most essential thing about communication and articulation is that if I'm not able to convey what I want to convey in the language that you understand, that I have not really been able to articulate my point, my problem, or my solution, or my feelings to you at all. Now, here is the essential part. you know we are going to be working in a multilingual world, a multi-regional, a multicultural world. And sometimes, for me, fortunately, I worked in MNCs, and I worked with a lot of different kind of people from different regions and religions, and areas of the world. Even India, for that matter, you will have people from south of India who have a different way of thinking. People from the western part, Gujarat and Bengalis. You see it. This is all a mix of the world, right? But eventually, what's important, we are all, as individuals, as human beings, we're all same, right? Now, what I mean by articulation is basically, am I able to really put across my perspective in a way that you are able to understand that. So that's the most essential part about articulation. Now let's take an example. um, I want to talk about, let's say, a design fault or a design issue with a product. Let's say we are in one organization and I am the head of manufacturing, and I'm now talking to my designing team, someone who is, my designers. And I come up with this point that, look, guys, you've done an excellent design. There's no two ways about that. But you know what? It's very difficult for me to manufacture that product, because what your design actually is telling me is that I need to, make that product in a way that it's actually increasing my manufacturing time by 40% and increasing my cost by 30%. Just examples here. Can can we work on this? Because by doing this, obviously our product is costly, and by the product being costly, my customers find it difficult to buy, and therefore my sales go down, and therefore my market share is less. Now, I've looked at the rather longish picture and talked to my designer saying that, look, can we look at, can you make it a bit easy for me, so that I can actually manufacture it easily, and maybe I reduce my manufacturing time by 20% or and my cost by 25%. And look, you know what? This is going to actually increase our sales because the product cost actually comes down. It's a very simple thing, by the way. There's no great rocket science I'm talking here. But the fact is, if I'm able to sort of link it up to a market share, to the customer, and to my own problem, that look, I'm having to, put in extra efforts, and this is serving no purpose, right? Obviously I can't go to the designing team and saying, you know what, your design is shit. Sorry for this word, but your design is crap. No, bekar hai. Now if I start with this, he's going to feel offended, right? So I'm going to actually say that, look, can you actually improve, or can you actually sort of make things easier for me and for the organization? So I'm going to actually articulate this in a way that he sort of says, boss, this makes sense. If you're talking about market share being linked directly to design of the product, and I can actually increase the market share by, let's say, 0.5% or 1%, by actually simplifying the design, I'll be able to get in more business. Wow, that makes sense. And I think you're making sense here. So it's about, once again, articulations means, and that's why I mentioned about this book, how to influence people, because it really talks about that, and believe me, it's a brilliant one. So basically, talking in the language that you understand, that the other person understand, not a physical language. I'm not talking Marathi and Gujarati and Tamil here. I'm actually talking the language of technology, or the language of business, or the language of costs, or the language of humans, right? If I'm able to show purpose, if I'm able to show cause, if I'm able to show that there is something that both of us will mutually benefit from, maybe you're in it with me, right? And that's what I mean by articulation. uh, it's about how to make sure that the other person really understands in the language that he understands. That's the essential part. Look, I've seen about this. I'll tell you about a lot of examples. A lot of engineers, by the way, and engineers have a way of talking, whether you understand it today, but engineers have a way of talking, and the business guys have a way of talking, and so, by the way, have finance guys, people with finance backgrounds, they have their own language. And this is not nothing to do with English or anything else. This is something to do with business. A a technology guy or an engineer who's been, head of engineering, or who has been doing engineering all his life, if he comes on, when he comes as he becomes the CEO, he needs to talk the language of business. And the most essential thing in life, whether you're working for someone, or you're driving your own organization, or at your home, right? You need to talk the language what the other person understands. um, you guys may not be able to relate with it, but when I talk to my 9-year-old son, I need to talk in his language. By the way, his language is language of technology, because these guys today are extremely ahead of people like me. He talks the language of technology, because he's right on his computer and his games practically throughout the day. So he has his own language. I need to understand his language nowadays. And by the way, he talks an American language nowadays, because he watches all that a lot of American videos. So I am also trying to catch up with his diction and his language. Now, that I believe would be articulation. If I'm able to convince my 9-year-old kid to do something, probably I'm good at articulation. Of course, it's very difficult. It's easier articulating with the people at work and people at friend. not with your kids who are 9 and 10. But if you're good at that, you're probably good. Same goes for your parents. If your parents are in the late 50s and 60s, early 60s or late 60s, and if you're able to talk their language, and this is the language I'm talking about, I'm not talking about Maithili here. I'm not talking about Tulu or Telugu. I'm talking about their language, what they understand. Then I think you've got excellent articulation skills. I hope this point is clear. Took a while, but I thought it's worth it.
Right. This was this was really very clear, sir. Like you took that those examples. So we have got another question. How do you manage emotions at workplace? Because usually, you get overwhelmed. Usually, sometimes you have a fight with your colleague. You have an altercations going on. Somebody doesn't do the work for you because it's not their KPI to do it. But mostly, so how do you manage emotions? Because that is something which becomes very important for, especially for the youngsters who enter.
No, absolutely, and I think we've especially now that we are going through the COVID, the pandemic, mental health obviously has been talked about in lots of forums nowadays, and this is something because I see a lot of anxiety amongst people as well, especially in today's times. But even notwithstanding that, you're right, Rishikesh. There are times where some of the colleagues might come across very strong to you. Their demeanor would be completely out of sync with what you're trying to do. But what's essential is that are you trying to do what is right? Right, so are you on the right side? Number one. And obviously it's very difficult because everyone feels that I am on the right side, the other guy is wrong. That's the first thing. So talking about emotions, I think the day, as I mentioned, the day you feel that both of us are in it together, all of us are in it together, I think that's the first thing, right? I have personally used a method which I'm not sure whether it is wrong or right, but I'll nevertheless share with you. And but before I do that, um, I'll give you an example. I don't know how many of you have watched Govinda's movies. Right, Govinda used to be a fascinating actor. He still, of course, is a fascinating actor, and I personally believe that he's one of the actors with probably the best of comic timings. No one rattles out dialogues as good as Govinda and Kader Khan and Shakti Kapoor put together. Put them in a mix in a movie, it's a super hit. And I believe he sort of there was a time of some 4, 5, 6 years where he gave hit after hit after hit. All those movies, I believe personally, never had a storyline. Never had a storyline, right? So one of the friends, when I was going to watch a Govinda movie. In fact, we were going to watch a movie, and he said, "Let's go and watch a Govinda movie." And I said, "Look, it doesn't have a storyline. It's like, what is there about it?" And he said, "Boss, that's the part. That's the whole fact. गोविंदा की मूवी देखने जाना है, अपना दिमाग है ना वो घर पे रख के जाओ, because you don't need it. आपको बस वहां जाके डायलॉग सुनना है, हंसना है और एंजॉय करना है." I think that is a very, very essential and powerful message. Keep your emotions out in the refrigerator when you go to the office. That's one way to look at it. Very difficult, very difficult. And therefore, I have personally never been able to practice that because it's very difficult. You can't. So this battle of heart versus the mind. It's a very difficult one, and most of us sometimes or the other have made decisions from the mind, and sometimes quite a few times made decisions by the heart as well. And especially when it comes to people, one tends to make decisions from the heart as well, and it's a very difficult one. But believe me, good leaders are able to sort of keep their hearts in the refrigerator or minds in the refrigerator as and when it matters. Now, when we are talking about emotions, it's a very difficult thing because when you're talking about emotional conflicts and simplify, let me simplify this point for you. मैंने कुछ कहा, आपने कुछ कहा, what you are saying I just don't understand, therefore I say यार आपको कुछ नहीं समझ में आता है, you don't know what we are doing here. That's a conflict because I feel I know all and you just don't know it, right? So that's something which is coming when I don't start using my mind. I lose the big picture. So first things first, once again it goes to the basics. Look at the big picture. Be humble and be respectful. Hear out the other person. What is he saying exactly? Right? And maybe, and please do introspection. There would be, 4 out of 10 times when you would feel that maybe you are at fault, when you really try and respond properly. So here is something which is called practicing the pause. Very, very, very difficult to do, but theoretically very good. So when someone, and I've seen something, and here is what I would like to share. Therefore, number one, practice the pause. Do not react, because half the time conflicts come from the fact that we start reacting. um, so when, let's say, you are in a conflict situation, when you are in an emotional situation, when you feel that what I'm trying to say, people don't understand, maybe people don't understand my perspective or my view, and they're on their own journey, they have their own agenda, etc., etc., hear them out. Don't react on the spot. A lot of us react. Many of us react to the situation. So here is a typical case. It's a meeting of 7 people. Someone says something, you react to it, and the meeting goes nowhere. It really punctures the agenda of the meeting completely, right? And you're working for the organization, believe me, at the end of the day. So don't react. Think about it, respond, completely synthesize what the other person is talking about, put yourself in his shoes. That's the most essential part, and then take a point that, yes, boss, what he's saying is making sense. Number one, this is the more theoretical work, but I'll give you a more practical way around it. I'll give you a very practical way around it, something that I have used personally all my life. And honestly, I don't know whether it has, but I believe it has given me dividends. I have always felt, and here is a theory that I have sort of practiced, and it might be questioned. Honestly, a lot of people have questions against it. um, Here is a 24-hour conundrum. All of us have only 24 hours per day. I am yet to see a person with more than that much amount of time in a day. And I like to sleep 8 hours a day. So that leaves me with 16 hours, right? On any given day. Out of that 16 hours, all your work, your chores, sorry, there's a bit of an echo. I don't know why. Uh, Maybe Rishikesh, your mic or something to do
I
with
think so. There's
someone's
a
mic.
bit of network issue.
Yeah, thanks. Let me try. Yes, yes. I think it's better now, Rishikesh. Thank you. So, 24 hours minus 8 hours, you're left with 16. 16 hours, you have your own food, nahana, dona, etc., etc. Another 2 hours are gone. You're left with 14. You have 1 hour to compute, go to the office, etc., etc., and everything else. Practically, that leaves you with around 13 to 14 hours, right? And out of those 14 hours, what do? You practically at 10 to 12 hours at work, right? And with your own family, your own friends, in a given day, how much time do you spend with your given family or friends? It's hardly 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours at most, right? But many of us treat that 4 hours or 2 hours or 2 to 4 hours saying, this is my family, this is my family life. Those 10 to 12 hours or 14 hours, we actually divide them as work hours because we're taught that way. This is work, that is employment, that's your business, that's your entrepreneur area. We forget, and therefore I sort of started, when I started my journey, I was very fortunate. I started this way. I had a family at work as well. So the way I regard this, that my co-workers, my fellow business guys, my fellow entrepreneurs, or my fellow people at the company, at the organization, are my family as well. And that's been my personal thought over the last 25 odd years. I believe all the co-workers, all my colleagues at my office are also a part of my family. And believe me, when it comes to family, you have a different way of working. I am yet to see a person who really keeps on fighting with his brother or sister or mother or father or whatever, and at the end of the day doesn't make up. Because come what may, we know it's family. Eventually we're going to make up. Yes, you might be wrong, you might fight, but finally it's the family. And therefore, as I said, a more practical way about this is to start treating your colleagues as your family. When you start treating your colleagues as family, you say, okay, this is my family, he's saying something, fine, he has a point, let me understand that point. If I don't agree to his point, I might say it on his face. At the end of the day, I make up saying that, boss, you know what I told you in the meeting was wrong here. or what you told me in the meeting was wrong here, maybe this is the right way of doing it. So in family you do patch ups. Similarly at work, if you start treating them as your own family, you will not be him versus me or her versus me in that case. Then it will be like one family trying to make a difference. And by the way, that's exactly what organizations are. We learn from our mistakes, we fall down, sometimes we fall down, but we come out of it together. But the time we start saying that it's my function, it's your function, it's my team, it's your team, it's my KPI, my KRA versus yours, the time we start bucketing ourselves into these massive silos or buckets, that's when it becomes difficult for us, because then playing catch up becomes almost impossible. So my 2 cents on this, maybe you can use this, treat them as your own family members, it will be much easier to do. Number two, obviously, as I said, don't react, don't just get this into it. Respond, empathize, understand what the other person has, a perspective, has a view, and above all, respect. Once you're willing to give respect, you will start understanding the other person is as human as me, the other person has as much right and stake in this organization as I have, and therefore what he says makes sense, right? So I start giving him more respect, giving him more importance, and then I start seeing view of it, right? So one needs to have the other person's views. Again, a bit of a lengthy conversation, but I believe that this is a very essential part, because you cannot succeed on your own. No function, no individual can succeed on the own. There are bound to be interdependencies, there are bound to be conflicts, and this is the best way I believe one can resolve conflicts, because there always be I'll give you another example. Again, from a similar thing. So once I got into a fight with my quality assurance guy, and by the way, he was senior to me, and he's going to kill me after this conversation, but I'm still going to put my neck on the line here. So I was in purchasing at that time, I was in supply chain, I was procurement, and he said that, look, you know what, you guys are bloody sorry about the language, he said, because I'm going to reproduce that, you guys are bloody postmen. You take the specifications, you just get the material, you're only a postman. My answer to him was that, you know what, quality, you're a sniffer dog. All you do is, you actually sniff the products that I get in, and you reject them, and you get a good pleasure out of that. And that fight, we still sit together after 25 years, and we still discuss that, and we enjoy every moment. And obviously we are the best of friends. My point is, even after having said these points, when I fell ill in that organization, and I had fallen ill with 105-degree Fahrenheit temperature, I was admitted, and the first person who came and saw me was the same guy who had actually talked about these things in the couple of days back, or one day back. This is the kind of family is what I'm talking about. So when you are in a family together, this is exactly what happens, right? You fight with your brother, but when the chips are down, you're in it together. So I think it's helped me, and I don't mind sharing this, that even after having these kind of fights, we are all in it together as one large family, even together, even today. Sorry, longish once again, but I thought it was worth it. Rishikesh.
So we have a question from Wapal. So people, people have joined in big numbers now. So Wapal is asking, "Ki how do you improve the communication gap, uh, which is one of the most sensitive factor inside any organization or in our daily practices, irrespective of any form of communication? So how do you bridge that gap?"
I think again the same question. Well, very good question. Um, a similar kind of a thing once again here. I have seen lots of organizations putting a lot of impetus on emails. I started, a personal practice of my own, not to respond on one particular subject more than 3 emails. So I don't personally do mail, what I personally call mail ping pongs. I don't do that. And unfortunately, emails have gotten us over there. You start a thread, and I've seen people respond on the same subject line 25 times. What I simply do is one mail, respond, second, third, I'll just pick up my phone and say, hey, look, let's talk it together. And I believe this is something that is absolutely essential, because you can't put emotions into your emails, right? And we were just discussing that a while back, that emotions, whether you like it or not, you can't put your mind and your heart into your refrigerator and go to work. You just can't do that. You carry your emotions with you. The only point is, in these kind of communications, it's very essential for, if I'm talking to, let's say, Vapul, I'm talking to you. Um, if I am able to, take my extra time and explain to you my perspective and understand from you your perspective, we can come to a level where we can agree. Or we simply say that, look, I agree to your perspective, but you know what? I can't agree on it because my work doesn't allow. Fine, it doesn't. It's still okay. But my only thing about making others understand, and that's the point that you had asked, is don't enter into this classical ping pong of emails or WhatsApps or any other communication platform that you might be having in your organization or you will be having. Lots of people get into that. I've seen people responding to the same mail 25 times. They just love doing that ping pong. It's going nowhere, and you simply keep getting down the pit. It's just not going to come out of it. So maybe once, twice, thrice at most, pick up your phone or walk up yourself to the other person's table or desk or whatever, and then say, hey, look, let's go to have a coffee together. Let's discuss it out. I think that's the most essential part. And believe me, as long as the other person with whom you are having a communication problem is working for the good of the organization, there is no harm in accepting that maybe I'm wrong, right? Maybe the other person actually has a good point, which you could probably be able to see if you talk to that person. So I don't know whether um, your organization allows for it, but coffee on a coffee table in a cafeteria with the person with whom you're having a communication problem, or a tea with him is never or her is never going to be a problem. You can always do that. You can take out time, um, you know, strike a dialogue, get into a dialogue, understand. And sometimes, if your organizations allow, or if your wallet allows, take him or out for maybe a couple of beers and have a conversation. No harm in having a conversation over beer, because I believe the best of ideas come in when you have a beer conversation or on a booze conversation, or no harm in doing that either. Seek the other person out, have a proper communication, and sometimes it's very essential to lower the guard. Beer does that, by the way. It sort of lowers your guard. Rishikesh, this you've got to expect, throw out of the window when you finally put this on. But if people are listening and if makes sense, I'm willing I'm willing to take a bite for that, because I believe eventually it's about striking a proper communication. And if you're able to see value in the other person's perspectives and make your perspective clear by a proper communication on a coffee table or some other table, I think it's worth it.
Sir, we have got another question from Sarang. So Sarang asks, like, what do you do in case there is a difference of opinion with your colleagues or bosses, and you can't just stand their approach?
So, Sharang, a very pertinent one. Sometimes you do get these kind of characters who, just don't look into your reason. There's only one way to do it. Keep on pursuing without being rude, um, humbly, politely, till the time the other person, sees reason into what you're trying to communicate or talk about. And again, I'll give an example. I worked for an organization where we had a head of engineering who was very difficult to work with. Would we talked about change management. He's a classical guy, very difficult. But I would never give up. Honestly, I would never give up. I was a junior person at that time, and as I said, I started my career in supply chain, and therefore supply chain and engineering teams, when they work together, the engineering teams normally feel that this is a commercial guy, doesn't really understand engineering. But I've always prided myself, at least in mechanical engineering, that I know a bit or two. So I would go ahead and have get into debates with him. Uh, but I never gave up. So I would keep on pursuing him till the time that he saw reason, or eventually he was like, "Tumko karna hai, kar lo. You will fail." And I'd say, "Sir, I will not fail. I don't worry, sir. I'll make you proud." And the other point, and here is something, I'm a Marathi guy, by the way. I'm Maharashtrian. So We have this saying in Marathi, um, की कावळ्याच्या ओरडण्याने सकाळ होत नाही, or something of that sort, which means that you know uh, normally when morning happens, when it's morning, you have the rooster that goes up, like the cuckoo, the cuckoo. um, so it's said that the rooster really understands and he actually goes ahead with that, but the crow doesn't. So crow can be speaking anytime. My point is, and I've always built, sort of believed in that as long as the morning happens, it doesn't really matter whether it's a rooster or a crow or a cow or anyone else. Really doesn't matter, right? The end point is, it's the morning which has happened. The dark night is over, or the night is over, and it's a new era that we are getting into, or a new episode we are getting into. So the point is, whether it's the rooster who takes pride in announcing a morning, or takes credit for morning, or it's the crow who takes credit for the morning, both are wrong. No one is getting the credit anyway. The morning was anyway going to happen. It's only that one of them is announcing it. So sometimes it is our ego that we need to overcome. As long as the organization benefits, it is immaterial or it's irrelevant who takes the credit for it. And lots of times we sort of are the people that, I want to take credit for it, was my idea. I've always, sort of worked on it, that it doesn't really matter whose idea it was, as long as the organization really came on top of that. And if it was my idea on which someone worked and takes credit, I don't really mind, I don't really care, because I have succeeded, and deep down I know that I got rewarded. So this is exactly the point I was talking about when I said about the head of engineering, that I you know spend a lot of time to convince that let's go for it. And very difficult. Once again, he never saw reason, and maybe he was right. I was a young brat. I had those those ideas which sometimes were risky, and obviously he had loads of years of experience, and he knew really risks, being the head of engineering, quality, etc. So he understood it much better. But one of the proudest moment of my life also has been when he once acknowledged, to my boss, saying that I would have loved if this guy were in my function. And I believe that was a great, compliment for me, because that sort of told me that I was able to get things done from a person who was very, difficult and had reason. But as I mentioned, he didn't see my perspective, but just by keeping at it, just by talking, just by having a dialogue and using reason and rationale, believe me, any dialogue, and I'm talking dialogue, can be won if you're able to show reason, logic, and rationale, and what's in it for me and the cause to the other person, and not take credit for it. Most of the problems come from the fact that the other person is a bit not receptible, because he knows that you're going to take credit for it, right? um, there's this kalka chokra syndrome also, which sort of comes in. All of you are millennials, and when you talk to these big bosses, sometimes this kalka chokra syndrome will come. Acha tum kal ka aaye ho, mere ko sikha rahe ho. That also comes in. So be polite. It's the articulation I'm talking about. Sir, what happens if we tried doing this? Let's try this, rather than saying that let's do it this way. It really matters. And these are small little things which I'm telling you, no colleges unfortunately teach, which all of us learn, sometimes the hard way, sometimes the easy way. But I think this is one way to sort of do it. Keep at it, never give up until the other person you're able to convince. And sometimes people will not be convinced. You got to then get into this, that how critical is this for me and my life and my organization. If it is not critical, if I have a 10-point pecking order, and this is the ninth or 10th item on the list, I might as well let it go. How does it matter? If it is not an impactful thing, let it go. So keep your ego in the refrigerator. That's one thing I would request. Go to the office, keep your ego in the refrigerator or wherever you want to keep it, because that doesn't help. Just doesn't help. And communications में half the time ego सबसे बड़ा problem करता है. Right. Parijat, good question, Parijat. Work from home mode, it is a lot more difficult to maintain focus on targets and ensuring focus on work. Um, Well, this is a bit of a difficult time that we are in. Look, I don't know how long is this work from home going to sustain. I believe the world will get out of that. um, some functions, organizations will see value to it. Like some of the IT organizations have already announced that they'll be, going in for a longish work from home. Some of them have also, I understand, announced a forever work from home, method, etc. But I personally believe that as the human race will come out of this. Yes, it'll be a longish for a while, and it's very difficult to sort of stay focused sometimes. um, Look, I personally also believe, as I mentioned, that we are all one family, right, with the organization. So it's very essential to stay focused. It's very difficult also, by the way, sometimes to stay focused. um, our own home family, if I were to use that word, the home family also sometimes feels that we are getting into their space, and which we are, by the way. While we were at home, they had their own timetable, they had their own ways and means, they had their own works to do, and their own leisure time to do about. But now that with work from home, we are eating into their space. So obviously, again, we'll have to keep balance and focus. When it comes to focus on targets, I don't think that's a question, because whether it is working from home or working from office, one cannot lose sight of targets anyway, right? Because that's what we are paid for. I mean, that's what we are employed for. As employees, if you start wavering from targets, whether you're working from home or office, I think it's incorrect. So obviously, not losing sight is going to be the serious concern. But more importantly, I think balancing between your home family and work family is something that one would need to do, and it's a personal choice, right? I mean, yes, you'll have to sort of sometimes shut the door because your child might come bothering in into an important meeting. But you know what? Personally, I don't bother about it, because I have sort of understood the fact that I am working from home. You know, the child was always at home. It's his home, by the way. When I'm not in office, I'm okay, fine. But the working days, I'm supposed to be at home. So right now I'm actually getting into his space. So once a while, if my son comes and joins a meeting, I personally would have no problem about that. Yes, some of the office colleagues might have. So while we try to do that and stay focused, I think we should also let go if once a while this happens. Someone's mic is unmute, or someone's shouting, somewhere. There's a lot of anxiety, by the way. Kids will fight. People will fight at home, because all this anxiety is also, showing up in different places. So there might be a bit of shouting coming from some colleagues' microphone, because his wife is probably cross at him for not doing something which he normally would have done. But since it's work from home, he's not done it, or she's not done it. Um, I think these are small little things we'll have to learn to ignore while we do this, and get back to a level where we keep up the focus. Because I don't think it's a right thing if you're losing your focus on targets, because honestly, that's what you're paid to do, right? I mean, that's something you'll have to do. But maintaining a balance is going to be essential.
Yeah. So there's a follow-up question which is there. So work from home has affected personal relationships with colleagues, where our interaction is mostly digital now. Does this have an impact on an organization?
I doubt. I mean, my organization has been working from home. I don't think it is. I personally have not seen any effect on the personal relations with colleagues. But yes, I mean, honestly, my learnings from work from home has been that the meetings have been more on schedule. We have everyone is working on online tools, and it's very easy to sort of maintain schedules. So it's a good thing that has happened to a lot of us. But I don't see any deterioration in relationship on account of work from home, because again, as I said, yes, you don't see people face to face right now, but once we get out of that, I think we'll be back to normal. Yes, if you're talking about missing those coffee times with colleagues, and those evening times with colleagues, I think we'll come back to normal as soon as things start getting better and better. And I think this will happen, I believe, personally. And this is not all today's talk has obviously been in my personal capacity, but I personally believe that maybe 3 to 6 months we should start coming out. We've got to hold on for 3 to 6 months. I personally also see that it's not going to open up immediately because obviously it's risky. I'm not a doctor, I'm not a medical expert here, but I believe that we should still be sort of, maintaining those requirements of social distancing, etc. And take these baby steps out of this thing. It's new for all of us, right? It's new for all of us. Those things are gone where you could immediately go and hug up your person. Today you will think 4 times before you doing that. So yes, we'll come out of that, but I personally don't feel we'll have an effect on the personal affection or relationship with people. Maybe there are some relationships which might have become a bit more how shall I say, a bit more formal, but I think we'll get informal pretty soon as well. That's what humans are.
So, so I've got a final question from my end. So since you do a lot of interview for recruiting people inside your team and outside your team as well, what are some of the things that you actually look for inside an ideal candidate?
Yeah, very good question. No, very, very good and very essential question. When I look at it personally, I believe so. Here are a few things, absolutely essential. A is the person a team player? Number one. Number two, is the person, um, is he the one who takes ownership? Right? Is he the one who would not create barriers and is good obviously at communication and articulation skills? Very essential. Does the person have energy? Right? Does he have that go-getter attitude? Because these are a few things which I believe are essential, more from a personal perspective. Then obviously come the more technical ones. Does he or she understands the business environment? How good is the commercial acumen? What is the drive for results? And most essentially, ethics and integrity. We none of us would like to have a member who is going to be playing around with rules, regulations, principles, violating them, and doing unethical practices. So those obviously are the core ones, and those are like the most essential ones. Those are the hygiene factors: ethics, integrity, etc. And hygiene factors. Technicalities, again, as I mentioned, I have, by the way, I have hired and I have put my money on people where they might not be the best technically compatible people, but people who have this urge to learn, and who are people who are good at taking ownership and delivering results by taking people together. Because I believe that you can teach people the technical skills. Those are certain things that come with time as well. So I don't think that's something that is so crucial for me. But as I mentioned, um, ethics, integrity, absolutely essential. Go-getter attitude, drive for results, and taking ownership. Working in teams, absolutely crucial, and high energy. I think these are a few things that are absolutely essential, because at the end of the day, when you are in the office, you wouldn't like to and this is obviously a very generic answer, because when you're looking at hiring, let's say, for a design department or an engineering department, you might not look at these capabilities there, because there you would like to see whether ethics, integrity apart, I'm talking about, there you might like to go into whether this person is technically brilliant or not, because that is essential. Because you're not going to have a person who a team man or a energetic guy, but making mistakes in designs, obviously. So it depends on what you're hiring for. But if you're hiring for a general business, or if you're hiring for commercial functions, or you're hiring for let's say functions such as engineering, quality, etc., or production, etc., these are some of the things that come in. When it comes to design, or high tech engineering, etc., or software, it's the technical skills which are absolutely essential. So whenever there is a function which needs people to work together, what I mentioned makes sense. When it's a individual contributor job or a technical job, those are the things that you sort of give more weightage to. But what is absolutely non-debatable is ethics and integrity. You can't go wrong on those. So that's what I personally look at candidates when I hire.
That was a great answer to have, sir. We'll all, work on those particular aspects while we, appear for an interview. Maybe takes time. So for all of us, sir, it was really an enlightening session for all of us. Uh, a number of people actually came up with a number of other questions, and so. So it's a kind of an humble request, sir. Like if these people send you a LinkedIn request, please do accept them, and they really have been inspired by what you have actually talked about, and we have been trying to reach as many young minds as possible, so as to let them know, like, the great leaders are not not actually inborn, but they're actually made with the kind of thinking, with the kind of um, uh, with the kind of the culture through which they actually go through, and the kind of mentorship which they actually get all through their life. So this is something which will inspire all of us over here. And thank you for taking out time, sir. Like, it's an honor because you have taken out time on a Saturday evening, and this is a time which you would be investing with your family, and this is also your family, sir. Actually, so you talked about the home family and the office family, and this is a kind of a memory bits family which you have. So thanks a lot again, sir, and we'll be in touch, sir. Actually, and whenever you get some time, maybe we'll join you again with some more insightful stories from you.
Sure. Thank you, Rishikesh. It's been really a pleasure to an honor to sort of connect with you and all the youngsters out there. My best wishes to all of you. And jate jate, a very small thing that I learned from uh, uh, from a Japanese Indian mentor, a fantastic a point. Apparently, and I this is something that I'm quoting from someone else. So apparently, the Japanese don't wish best of luck, they wish for others to do their best. And I think there's a big difference. So they're actually taking the luck part out of your efforts. What they're saying is, it's not the best wishes or all the best that they wish do your best. And I think that's a very important message. It is from Vijay Michihito Batra, one of the sessions I attended of his, where he meant that, as a Japanese method, I wish you do all the best, make all your best efforts. Luck plays a part, but a limited part. But if you keep on doing your best, you'll definitely achieve your best and achieve your goals. So all the very best, and do your best to everyone. And wish you, great careers ahead, great lives ahead. It's been a great pleasure talking to all of you. Thank you and God bless.
Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.